Cache-maniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
It's time for the 34th. I'm already messing up. It's time for the 34th Beta GeoGearHeads. I'm Daryl W4 with the Bad Cop, as usual, and we have some guests you'll recognize to talk about going to a smartphone from GPSRs.
And this is where we talk. Hey, guys.
Hey, guys.
Did we lose the Bad Cop?
We might have.
I heard a bing.
I think it's night where he's at.
Anywho, so.
Yep, we have lost the Bad Cop.
So it's Daryl. It's the Geocaching Podcast.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yay!
Oh, well, guys who are watching live in the Hangout, we'll be editing this part of it out. Okay, I'm going to continue on, and hopefully he'll be able to get back in. Before we get to that, we've got some comments from listeners via Google+. We'll share tonight as we get into that topic. But next week, we're joined by another geocaching blogger for a discussion as to why geocachers still should use GSAC. We'd love to hear your comments and questions on that subject, too. So call them into the hotline at 206-350-3647, or social media, as most of tonight's contributors have done, or, of course, the contributors that we have next week have used this one, and that's email at geogearheads@cachemaniacs.com.
So, with that out of the way, let's get back to X-Punk X and Head Hard Hat.
Well,
Hey, guys, welcome back.
It's going to be back for this reunion show, I guess.
Always fun, guys. I'll tell you what. Doesn't matter whether we're actually recording live or not. Always great to be here.
Yeah, as people who were not privy to the pre-show would have been really amused by some of our antics ahead of time.
Yeah, well, once you get a bunch of guys together, and always fun to talk about whatever it takes, and this is no exception.
Right.
Yeah, our very own little geocaching party.
Oh boy.
Well, Bad Cop, you want to get into the feedback with our first one from your favorite DJ?
Well, I'd love to. Your favorite DJ via Google Plus told us, crazy. In the last show, you were talking about filling up all your waypoint memory in your GPSR, and I thought, as if I'm going to fill up all the waypoint memory in my GPSR. That'll never happen to me. Well, today I was loading some more new caches in my area, and bang, I got the message saying that my waypoint memory was full. What a shock! So, now I have a question for the GeoGearHeads crew, and that's all of us here, and the listeners. What do you start deleting? I'll start with the far out-of-town ones that I know I won't be going to in a while, but should I try to delete my cache finds? I think it's great to look at the screen and see all my finds, but what else can I do but delete them? Does everyone else have their found caches in their GPSRs?
No, we did reply to him on Google Plus and give him some information, because this was actually from the last time all of us got together on GeoGearHeads. And I think basically what we had told him was, yeah, I don't bother keeping my found caches in there, because it does end up just being too much clutter, especially if you have one of those older units that only has, say, three like 500
Three caches.
All three of them.
Yeah, all three of the caches in my area. So,
and that case, keep the found ones if you've only got three. I mean, you got to have something to look at.
Exactly. But we did get into a little bit with loading via POIs if you wanted to do that. And that's one of the things that I've talked with some people, and they've done, is any of the active caches that they found, they'll load in as POIs as references in case they're going out to hide new caches, including each of the stages of those caches. So it's a way for them to have a reference, and that can be really handy. But at the same time, I don't really want that because it's so much clutter on my screen.
Right. Yeah, same with me. I don't do that. I do have my found caches that I found and logged through Geosphere that I leave on my phone, and that way in a separate category in there, so that way I can see those if I need to on a map too. But as far as my GPS goes, no, I don't leave them on there. In fact, I just every time I load the new Packet query, I delete whatever's on there. I completely get rid of all of the old ones.
Yeah, I agree. That's the same thing. If you want to have it, that's one of the beauties of having GSAC and some of the other applications out there to keep that type of information of all your finds and all the other goodies that you go to. But yeah, each and every time I blow it away and put on new, because a lot of times I'm going in totally different areas anyways.
Absolutely, and that could be probably a whole show in itself, is just talking about different strategies for waypoint management.
Yep.
Yeah. I just want on there caches I'm going to find or that I have the possibility to find. I don't care about the ones I've already found. Most of the time, if I'm going out with somebody, they're going to get me in the area and I'm going, oh, yeah, it's behind that tree over there. I remember now.
Yeah. Well, the advantage becomes really when you get into the placement. That's when you want those caches you found, because they're not going to show up there. You want each of those stages if you can, because that's going to trigger proximity alerts and get your cache potentially rejected. So there is some good value to having that available, but it's just not something I want on my GPS when I'm just out hiding. Well, and Geosphere, and a lot of the other apps will do this too, is a great way to handle that. So that gets into one of the advantages we'll be talking about today too.
Well, and if you're a premium member, you can always download the My Finds query and load that back if you want to.
Absolutely. But again, if you're looking for that, hey, I just found this really great park that someone's taken me to, and I want to place another cache here, it's nice to have that available in the field. So that's when the smartphone can really come in handy with the option to turn on and off different groups of caches. And again, we'll get into that in a little bit. But before we do, let's go to some feedback we got from team, I think it's actually pronounced Gooey Frog, via Google+, and they said, I just listened to the show. I use my Garmin 60 CSX, which I love dearly, although I wish I could hold more than 1,000 waypoints. While accuracy in urban areas is horrid, let's think NYC, on a mountaintop I've seen 7-foot accuracy, and if I use the average function to place a cache, in general I have 14 to 17 feet accuracy, not 30 feet. As for smartphone caching, I've been in places where there is little or no data service, poor data service, no cell service, or all of the above. So ultimately, it has been and will remain to be the GPSR for me, with smartphone for paperless caching. I also don't I also don't live log, but use field notes. I'd rather spend the time with a proper keyboard and write logs when I get home. So that's going to lead us into kind of the first point of today, which is you don't necessarily need to have a smartphone as the replacement for the GPSR, but it's a great supplement for the GPSR. And that's how most of us who have gone to the smartphone, who had the GPSR, really got started in it is, well, we got the smartphone, we can look up live data, it's great for paperless caching, it's great for doing those first defines, so that's how we're going to use it. Most of us who've gotten into that also tend to end up using the smartphones more and more, especially in the urban areas like he was talking about. One of the big problems with the high accuracy GPSRs is when you're in the urban canyons like that, where you have those buildings refracting the signals, those high accuracy, high sensitivity GPS antennas will actually be a detriment because they're picking up stray information and trying to process that. So you're going to find that many times those really good, high accuracy, high performance GPSs don't end up working so well in urban settings. And again, a lot of people like the smartphones because that's where those really it can excel.
Yeah, many times when you go out geocaching with stuff, and at least that's the way that I've seen, regardless, I would say 75% of the geocaching that I do on a daily basis. So in other words, I'm not just planning a trip, I'm just going out. I say, hey, I got an hour, I got 45 minutes, I need to go geocaching. That's what I use as a smartphone, just for that reason. It's there. It's in your pocket. It's ready to go. And unless you're in an area, like you said, where you're downtown Boston or you're downtown North New York or what have you, I can't say Raleigh because most of the buildings here are about knee high, anyways. But for the most cases, yeah, you don't have to worry about that too much. Where I get bit a lot with that is the hollers. When you are out in the wild and you're down in the valleys and you're down in the areas. Sometimes it's a crapshoot with regardless if it's a GPSR or a smartphone, you're going to be playing bouncy narrow.
Well, do you know why the smartphones tend to be so much better in the urban canyons than most other GPS dedicated devices are?
Is it with a cell phone? Cell network?
Well, the cell network
GPS.
helps. I'm sorry?
The augmented GPS, yeah, using the cell towers for location.
Yeah, it actually gets better than that, and this is something that one of our listeners had actually brought up too, which is if you have Wi-Fi enabled on Android and on iOS phones, and I believe that the current batch of Windows phones will do this as well. If you have that Wi-Fi enabled, it actually can triangulate essentially. It's not very accurate, but it can actually use the Wi-Fi signals to help position where it is. So it's using that additional information to help refine and kind of filter out some of the noise that it might be picking up otherwise.
Yeah, because doesn't it with the cell tower, you're talking 1,400 feet either way. Normally, it's not pinpoint accuracy with the cell towers.
No, and there are some GPSs that have used the cell towers to help improve their acquisition speed and to help filter stuff out. And again, the problem is with the cell signals, that's not all that good, and they tend to bounce as well. With Wi-Fi, they're very, very low power signals that don't have a whole lot of, you're talking at most about 300 feet. That you get out of a Wi-Fi signal. So by using that, if they know where that signal came from, they have a pretty good idea of where you are, and that really does help to filter it down. So when I go out, I usually turn off my Wi-Fi because I don't want that extra drain. But it is a nice feature to have when you're in the urban jungle and trying to narrow stuff down. If you turn that Wi-Fi back on, chances are it's going to be able to pick up a Wi-Fi signal that helps it narrow down your location.
Nothing like those concrete canyons.
Indeed. Well, let's get to another point here that he had made, which was the no data, the poor data, the cell coverage, all that kind of stuff. And that's a good point, too, especially because now we're looking at needing to kind of monitor what we're putting in as far as data goes, our data usage, because we can have overage charges very easily. And a lot of people have had to deal with this all along. But we've done a couple of shows talking about doing stuff offline and caching maps and caching your caches. And that really is something good to do. And we've talked with a number of people who have used their GPSs or their smartphones actually completely disconnected, and well, we have someone here who pretty much does that all the time.
That's right. I do it all the time. And for me, it's not been a problem. Yes, I can't live log, which I don't want to anyway. But I just used it over the weekend, and it was fabulous. I just download the caches ahead of time and have them with me. So I know where I'm going in the area. If I get out of that range, I stop at a Starbucks, a McDonald's, grab some free Wi-Fi, download the new caches in that area, and keep going.
And that's the great thing about Wi-Fi these days is you can almost find Wi-Fi anywhere. So even if you are, using an offline device like you have that has Wi-Fi in it, you'll still almost always be able to find somebody or somewhere that you can do that. Now, granted, you can't do that while driving down the road. Say you're on a road trip. If you're just driving down the highway.
You'd be surprised.
Well, don't forget that a lot of the rest areas now and the service centers are having some kind of Wi-Fi. I don't know how many Paneras I've run into at the service centers on tollways, and almost every one of those has had Wi-Fi available. Yeah, sometimes you might have to pay for it, but if you grab an hour or so and just download some caches, cache some more maps, it's not that bad. And that one of the nice things with doing that is you can use something like a tablet that doesn't necessarily have that 3G service. I have that Acer A100 that has the GPS, but no data service. It's just the Wi-Fi. Same thing with the Nexus 7. You can go out, grab the maps, grab the caches, and go. The problem is finding the software that will actually do that. If you're looking for the maps, that gets really tough. Locust Free, I think it was, or Locust Free and Locust Pro on Android are supposed to be really good apps for doing that. I haven't had a chance to try either one of those out. Headhard Hat, have you had a chance to play with those?
Yeah, I actually got Lotus Pro put on, and I was very pleased with it. It is geared to be made for only having your GPS signal. It's not really geared as much for having any type of connectivity, and they tell you this right in the application. I did have one issue that I'm trying to work out right now, filtering out my finds on that. For some reason, I'm having a great difficulty with that. But as far as the actual usage of the product, it's really great. Now, if you're going to go for bursts of data that you're going to need, also remember when you're using your tablet or if you're using a particular device with that, for example, with my Samsung with the Galaxy S3, you can turn on the Wi-Fi and actually use the internet service through that to download the information. As long as you got the cellular service, you're all set. You turn it on for the amount of time you need to get the information you need to go, and you're on your way. So that's just another option.
Yeah. Turning on the personal hotspot on the phone or having a hotspot with you.
Yeah, but really, there is a lot of advantage to trying to load those caches in, at least, whether you have maps or not. I think most of us on the show really like using Geosphere, and that's one of our favorite tools, which doesn't have the offline maps feature. But that, like most of the other apps that I know of for smartphones, does allow you to cache pocket queries. You have to import the pocket query, it's on the phone, and you don't have to worry about it. And a lot of them, like we talked about earlier, where you can turn on and off certain groups of caches. So if you want to do something like your My Finds pocket query, you can put that in there, turn it off so you don't have to see it most of the time, and then if you do need it, turn it back on. So that's a really, really nice feature. It acts as layers, essentially, of the map, and you can turn on layers of caches and stack them all up, or turn on one or two. I end up having like 6 different layers that I load stuff into. Things like solve puzzles, stuff for trips, stuff for events. And one of the nice things about doing those groups and hiding the caches that you don't necessarily want to look at is that can affect your performance if you've got 2,000 caches in there. A lot of the phones really don't have that much processing power. So that's a good way to improve your performance as well.
Right. Now, one of the best things I would say, from as far as going from going to a smartphone from a GPSR, is that ability to have all of that information there with you. Whether it be a live connection automatically through the app or something like this where you cache the pocket queries and things like that. I've not met. I mean, there are phones, or my Magellan Explorer 610 does have some sort, you can you see the logs and see the data and stuff like that. So you can do that information with that. But especially if you're getting these older GPSRs that don't really have much caching as far as functionality in it, it's great to have, like, because I have my Garmin 76 CSX, and it's basically just a waypoint. Now you can do some, with GSAC and things, you can do some naming of the waypoints so that you can kind of tell what's there. But with the phones, it's just amazing because you have all the logs. You can share them if you want. Say we go caching together, and I'm caching with the bad cop here, and I have the information already in town. I can quickly export a GPX file right on my phone, send it to him. We have Wi-Fi. He gets it, perfect like that. And
exactly,
it's one of those things that I think it would be hard to go back the other way and drop the using the device.
Well, please don't drop the smartphone.
Yeah, really. Actually, that's a really good point, Daryl. A lot of times, the things that you have to consider, especially if you're going to
Oh boy, I think we've
go out geocaching, because many.
Headhard Hat, we're
I get cut off there.
On your connection.
Sorry about that. But no, one of the things that I was going to bring up as a point was that protecting your phone while you're going out geocaching. I mean, it is so important. These phones, even if you get them, you just started your new wonderful time of 2 years of obedience,
labor.
Yes, for that. The Galaxy S3, that was $150, and that was on sale. So it's a $600 phone. This is not something that you're going to want to have that has literally now your entire life encoded into getting dropped into a stream or hitting a rock. So maybe some of the things that we could talk about is some of the things for your iPhones and the Androids, how to protect them when you're out in the elements, because these are not cheap.
No, and one of the other big things that you do have to worry about is that battery, and some will have interchangeable batteries, some won't, and that's a whole argument that we can get into for another day, whether it's better to have an interchangeable battery or not. But even some of the phones that do have the interchangeable batteries will have an option for an external battery case, and I really do like that better than the interchangeable batteries, because I can swap those in and out while the phone is running, and there's nothing worse than getting toward ground zero and finding that your battery is dead and you have to reboot your phone.
Right.
If you've got one of those interchangeable batteries, you're talking at least a minute or two, which, let's be honest, that's not all that bad. But for most of us, we're not that patient anymore.
Especially if you're standing knee-deep in a swamp somewhere. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So that is something that you want to take a look at, is those external cases. And I've seen at least 3 now for that Galaxy S3, which is a relatively new phone.
Yes.
And that provides some level of protection should you drop it.
Right.
Precisely. And one of the things that I tend to look for are the silicone cases, because that gives it some extra grip. How many times have you had your GPS or your smartphone or your PDA or your coffee mug, for that matter, slip out of your hands because you just can't seem to get a hold of it that day?
Never happens.
It's too dry, your hands get too wet. So I like having that little bit of extra grippiness. Now, the problem that most people I know complain about with that is they stick to your pockets. So if you're one of those people who likes to stick it in your pocket, don't. It won't come out.
You'll turn your pocket inside out. All the change and the keys fly out.
All that wonderful lint will be there.
Oh, after the first time, the lint's gone. That is a benefit. It'll stick to the case and nothing flat. You don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, there are some other options, though, like the OtterBox cases are very famous. There's some new ones that are coming out, I want to say, called Life Case, that have really gotten some rave reviews, that are some nice, heavy-duty, waterproof, shockproof kind of cases. So that's another good thing to look at. However, they don't have the battery connections most of the time. There are some that will, but most of the time they don't really have those connections. So
but most
one
of
the
them
other
should
things,
have a data jack in there, or a jack of some sort that you can plug an external battery into.
if they're fully waterproof, most of those don't have it, because that's one more seal that could leak. But most of the, and they also won't work as a phone anymore either, because they're all sealed up. You'd have to use Bluetooth to actually use it as a phone. But yeah, there are some that are water resistant, but if they're actually waterproof to 30, 40 feet, they tend to avoid having any kind of ports if they don't absolutely have to.
Yeah, but I've seen some cases for the iPhone that it'll keep it completely safe, but turns it into something the size of the Garmin Montana.
Right. Yeah, you got a brick in your hand there.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So
even with the OtterBox, that's too big for me. I mean, I do like to have a little bit of a case on mine, cause for the same reason. The iPhone is just so slippery. It's so easy to drop. But with I've got just a little protective case on mine that has just enough grip that I can keep it without dropping it much. I have dropped mine some, but it's not the waterproof. It definitely not waterproof, but it's not also making it the size of a brick. Where it's those OtterBoxes are just so hard to use for me because they're just so big.
Agreed. I got the OtterBox very early on in my iPhone 4 career, and I never use it because it just makes it so big and bulky, and I just don't really like using it. We got one for the original iPad, and it doubled the weight, it seems, of the iPad, and we never took it out when we had that on there. So one of my favorite things for helping to protect, it doesn't do much for shocks because it doesn't have any cushioning, is just a standard dry bag. And these things are fairly inexpensive. You're talking as little as like $5. They can get a lot more, but you can find some for cell phones and cameras that are only like $5 that really do a nice job. And I think it's really worth doing something like that because you can use it for a camera or for a cell phone or for, just about anything that you want to keep dry. So they're much more flexible. It's an investment. You spend $50 for a case, let's say, on an iPhone, and when your contract is up and you replace that phone, that case is worthless as well. So it is kind of nice to have those dry bags because they will work with just about anything as long as it will fit in there. And a lot of people like just using them to store, maps and some cash in there. So if they do happen to get dunked in the river, that stuff doesn't get all, mucked up too.
Yeah,
I'll tell you what,
nice for that kayak trip.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, though, when you are in that situation where you're out on a mile in on a trail someplace, you hear that thunderclap and you can hear the rain coming, that's when you really realize, oh, my goodness, it would be nice to have that.
Right.
Or, hey, I've got it here. I can protect this. That's when the moment of truth is.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's always those Ziploc bags that most of us will carry along anyway for the logbooks. Try to keep one extra that will fit your phone, because if you're in an emergency kind of situation, at least you have that.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't trust it on that kayak trip, but in a sudden downpour, it's going to save your
better
phone.
than nothing.
Yeah. Okay, here's one for you. Now, I have my own personal opinion. I'm curious about what you guys feel about this. Having insurance on your smartphone, yay or nay? I see Winston over with Xbox X. So.
Yeah, I mean,
it depends a lot on the insurance. A lot of those insurance policies really don't do too much. The one that I ended up with on my phone is AppleCare from Apple, which doesn't cover accidental damage. They do now have AppleCare Plus, which for $50 will cover, I believe, 2 incidents of accidental damage. But I do like AppleCare. I don't like the policies from the carriers because it's a lot more expensive, and you have to kind of do the math. If it's going to cost you $20 a month over the course of a year, that's $240.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You could buy this phone.
You could buy a whole nother phone in the 2-year plan.
Yeah.
So.
You may not be able to buy the Galaxy X S3 at a $600 price, though.
Very true.
Now, I'm against the insurance. I'm just going to come out and say that. I would rather say, I'm going to take better care of this than drop it. But accidents happen.
Yes.
Right.
The only insurance I've ever gotten on a phone was my daughter's phone, and she was texting, I don't know, 10 billion texts a month, and she's just simply she went through 3 phones.
She wore out the phone.
Yeah, just simply wore out the phone. So, other than that, if you break a screen, I've got a place here I can go get it fixed relatively cheap.
Yeah.
Now,
that's why the AppleCare does work for me. Is it's not for the accidental damage, because I haven't actually, knock on wood, had any problems with that. I've had problems where I use the thing so much that on one of them I wore out the home button.
Right.
On another one, I actually cracked the dock connector. And all of these things are just, take it into the Apple store, they swap it out, and I'm walking out with a brand new phone. Well, brand new refurbished phone.
Right.
But for the, I think it was only $100. I don't think it's even that much for the basic AppleCare. And then AppleCare Plus is a little bit more. But the nice thing with AppleCare Plus is that you do get that accidental damage protection.
Now, I did get, with the Galaxy S3, I did get the insurance this time, and I'll tell you why. One, it was only $6 a month. So I'm thinking, that's not bad, that's reasonable. I also really, before I actually signed on the dotted line, it's like, okay, what does this actually cover? I can bring in $0.25 of the thing because it got ran over by a tank, and they will replace it. There's no limit on the number of times of replacements, though he did say if you're replacing it 3 times a month, we're going to talk to you about this. But he said you can replace it as many times you want, as long as the Galaxy S3 is being done where it's available, they will replace it with that. And he said if it has to go to an upgrade down the road, that's fine. But I figured for a 2-year contract at $6 a month, with the amount of time I take this thing out using it for everything from the blog to geocaching to everything I do now, I thought that was actually worth the investment.
So you're going to use it to chalk your tires now when you park?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, it really depends on how you're going to use it, what the rate is, and how much the deductible is.
Right.
And it can be worthwhile. The problem had been for many of the new phones was that you couldn't get it until the phone had been out for like 6 months because they had to build up an inventory of dead and repaired phones before they'd start offering the program. And my general feeling is by the time a phone is 6 months old, it's probably
done.
not worth doing the protection plan anymore because you can find them cheap used. You can find the people who will repair them, especially because the iPhone is such a popular non-serviceable phone. You find all kinds of iPhone and iPod repair shops all over the place.
Yeah.
I can drive within 10 miles of here and probably find about a dozen of those shops now. So it's really easy to get phones fixed after they've been out for a few months, and people can start accumulating the spare phones to tear apart, and once parts have gotten into the channel. So when it comes out as a new phone, I think that insurance is much more valuable than when it's an older phone.
Yeah, this one, I was actually really surprised because the Galaxy S3 came out that particular Thursday. I bought it that Sunday, and he said if the phone broke today, we'll replace it tomorrow. So I was really impressed with that.
Now, I think we've kind of given people a lot of reasons to not get a smartphone. But let's kind of talk about why it is that you might want one. We already mentioned a little bit about that live connectivity, but we really didn't go into it. One of the big things that a lot of the folks around here got into was using the smartphone for those FTFs, if not to actually use the phone to find, just to pull up the information. Before you even had GPSs and smartphones that were mildly usable, people were pulling that stuff up and using it. So that's a really, really obvious option, is for that live confirmation. And XMikeX, you kind of brought up earlier, the logs in your GPS, if you have paperless caching into the GPS, and the same thing will hold true if you do the caching of the caches, those logs are out of date by the time you've gotten that pocket query.
Right.
So it is nice to be able to go out and find those newer logs and see if something might have changed.
Exactly.
One of the great stories that I could tell would be one time we were out looking for cache. I pulled up the information, and this was actually even before I had the smartphone. I was just doing it on a feature phone. Pulled up the cache on the WAP page and found it had been disabled that morning.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, for me, I like having Geosphere, and I also have Geosphere and the official iPhone app, Groundspeak app. And the reason I have those both is because for that very reason. With Geosphere, I can click and open up the web page. So if I find that even if my data is off and I can't find the cache and I want to see maybe if it is archived or whatever, I can open up the web page, or I can tell it to open it up in the geocaching app. And because I find that's a little bit easier to read on the phone is the app. So, I could go back and forth between the two, but I do, use those, and I'm able to see the web page and or the official app to get that live connectivity, even though I'm using an app right now that currently doesn't have the API access.
Yeah, I can understand that. I deal with that a lot myself. So.
Well, another great thing about having that live connectivity, and we actually talked a little bit about the live logging versus field notes. I don't like doing live logging even for my FTFs, but I do know a lot of people who, as a courtesy to the other FTF hounds, really want to make sure they get that field note in, or that live log in on a new cache instantly. And we used to do that too because we had as many as like a dozen teams in the area going after caches. So I wanted to be able to post that right away as soon as I got a cache, especially if I got it within like the first 10, 15 minutes, to let people know, yeah, you don't want to pack up your car and drive 20 minutes to get here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for the most part, I do field note stuff like I talked about last week. That way, even on the smartphone, that way I can do a little bit more of change editing and changing my logs once I get back, as far as expounding on what the thing was. Because I don't like typing even on the smartphone. Typing on the keyboard is a little bit cumbersome. So I mean, it's not bad. It's definitely better than say the Explorer 610, where you have to like one key at a time and you can't do multiple. It's not very fast. But for myself, I do the field noting, but I have done again the live logging, and that is nice because that way you can, like you mentioned, Daryl, post it right away. I like to more do that from like travel bugs and things. Granted, I didn't do that. Bad cup. I just dropped a travel bug here that I had for like I think 10 months, but I did, even though I had it for 10 months, I dropped it and logged it pretty quick. That way that people knew that it was in the cache. Because like, even with the travel bugs, you don't want to get them out of sync. You want them to be placed in the cache when they're there and out of the cache when they're there. Especially if it's a high travel cache, and it has that possibility of someone else coming in and finding the travel bug, grabbing it before you actually even get to drop it into the cache.
Yeah, and I do like doing the bugs through the phone a lot of the time when we, specifically when we drop them. Because when we drop the bugs, I want someone to be able to pick them up right away that same day. Again, especially around events and especially on new caches, because someone's going to pick that up, and we find so few people really understand how to work with Trackable. So it is really nice to be able to drop those instantly.
Yeah.
Well, and it's a great tool because how many times have you gone to a cache, found a traveler that you say, "Oh, this is kind of cool. I'm interested in taking this guy for a little bit of a trip, but I have no idea what his mission is."
Yeah,
well,
right.
With a smartphone, and even with a feature phone using the wap.geocaching.com site, you can punch in that trackable and get the information about its mission right there, and that really does prove to be an asset that's indispensable.
Yep.
Right.
Another great thing about having the smartphone is it is another screen. I love being able to walk to a cache with a cache description on one screen and the arrow and or map on another screen. It's just so much more
available information. Yes.
Yeah. And one of the things that I did a lot of the time was I'd be working on the Palm, putting in my notes for the cache that we just finished as we're starting toward the next cache.
Yes.
So you can do some of the multitasking kind of stuff when you have
Right.
the two units rather than the one. And now that we're getting into smartphones that have so much better capabilities, I can sit there looking at this beautiful map of all kinds of information that I can't really get on the GPS, whether it be satellite maps, the cool topo maps,
Yep.
Orienteering maps in some cases. So you can sit there looking at that and the placement of the caches and kind of use that for planning your routes, but use the GPS to actually get you there. So it's really nice to have both of those things side by side at all times just to try to find them.
Yeah, because how many times have you been out on a multi-cache and you're looking for something in particular? The information that's available that you're looking for is somewhat lengthy, and to have to switch back and forth on the screen can be bothersome and time-consuming and a bit frustrating sometimes. It is nice to be able to have multiple devices out there, so that is a great point.
Well, and one of the things that I really love is for puzzle caches.
Yes.
Yes.
How many times have you gone out there and found one or two answers where you're questioning whether it's 1 or a 4 or something like that? With having that Google Map or Bing Map in the background, one of the things I tend to do quite frequently with the puzzles is I'm sitting there solving it, I punch it in, look at it, even before I do anything with the GPS, I'll bring it up on the phone on that Google map and look at where it puts it. A lot of the times I'll find, well, this answer can't be the right one because it's in the middle of the shopping mall.
Right.
Right.
But if I change it to this answer, it's in a tree in this park nearby. That sounds a lot more feasible. I'm going to try that.
Right.
Well, even one up on that, how nice is it to just be able to hook onto the internet and go do GeoChecker? I mean, that's a great lifesaver many times, because a lot of puzzle caches, some people wait and they figure everything out ahead of time. Sometimes when you're on the fly doing that, you're just taking a shot. But to be able to just click on the internet, be able to look up and go, oh yeah, this is correct, and then actually be able to go is a huge plus.
Oh, no doubt. Well, we're going to have one more comment from a listener before we wrap up today's show, and that's from D. Vixen, who posted again on Google+. Quite interesting little comment. She said, over the past weekend, I used the GPSR for the first time in forever, and I was surprised that the screen wasn't responding to my fingers. When I got home to log 2 caches, and found the GPSR had 2 finds that I'd never logged. Facepalm.
Whoops.
Yeah, so that's another way that I really like using the smartphone in the field is I'm doing my field notes. I keep them on the device until I've made sure I've got enough information in there, and then between caches, I'll go and upload them so they know that they're saved to the geocaching servers and off my phone. So if something happens to my phone, same thing could happen to a GPS. If something happens to the GPS, you're kind of up the creek, which might be where your GPS is for all I know.
Right.
You have some backup for that, and I'm a little paranoid about problems like that because I did have a Palm, I think it was a Tungsten E, that every so often would decide to fritz out when the battery got low, and this was a common problem with some of those early lithium polymer batteries. If the battery got low, it would send out a static charge and fry anything in RAM.
Oop.
Yep.
So I lost many, many field notes that way back in the day, before we even had field notes.
Yep.
And the second log is never as good as the first log.
Very, very true. And when you've gone and done the 30, 40 caches that you've just been driving around, what's the chances that you remembered which caches you really hit and which ones you didn't?
Oh yeah.
I hate that.
Yeah, and power caching runs are where I find that the Geosphere really is my favorite tool, because I go through with that stamp option, where you can template it. This is our 5th find of the day. This is our 7th find of the day.
Yes.
Puts the time in there. You just sit there, bam, 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 bam. When you hit the cache, you can put a few extra little notes in there. I can send those right to geocaching.com, and better yet, I can go and email that to everyone else who's in the car with me.
Right.
And then they can upload it to their page, make their own tweaks to the logs, and everyone's field noting with the same information. And it's a great way to do check and balance too. We sat there many times in the car when we're doing a power run. Okay, I've got that we've done 58 caches. How many do you have? Oh, I'm at 59. Okay, one of us is off. Let's go through that list as we're sitting here, trying to find what to do for lunch. So yeah, it is nice to have the 2 devices just as a check and balance, and to go and do your finds on both devices so that you have the information in both places.
Yep.
Without a doubt.
Well, thanks again, you guys, for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you on, and I'm sure we'll have you back sometime before too much longer.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
And join us again next week as we talk about GSAC and whether geocachers really should be using that anymore or not.
Ooh, that's a good one.
You have to wait until next week, though. Check the Cacheamaniacs website at cacheamaniacs.com for more on the GeoGearHeads, including show notes for this and all our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us feedback by calling 206-350-3647 by emailing GeoGearHeads at cacheamaniacs.com or through social media. Your support helps keep the Cacheamaniacs shows coming, so please consider making a PayPal donation through the link on our website to support the Cacheamaniacs shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Umfenauer and Daryl Wattenberg. The show's copyright 2012 by Daryl Wattenberg, all rights reserved.
Cash with the Cacheamaniacs.